Now, an important question when you're doing stand type maps is, are you a lumper or are you a splitter? Where a lumper would say, this and this can go together, and a splitter might say, that and that look different enough, I'm going to split them. That raises the question of the minimum mappable unit, which is the smallest feature that you would define on a map like this. Similar concept in soils mapping, stand mapping, other mapping of that kind. You can use the polygon tool to quickly trace the boundaries here. We're not going to keep this polygon, we're just using this for rough measurements, and it's a 12-acre block. So you might define the minimum mappable unit as 10 acres. If it's less than 10 acres, it's just an inclusion within another stand type. Like this would be an inclusion within this stand. I don't see harvest trails going past here, but it doesn't make sense to block out this little tiny 3 or 4 acre stand if our minimum mappable unit is 10 acres. This line is drawn on the basis of the color of these crowns and their apparent size. So I see more big crowns here and more trees with their leaves off. I see more small trees with their leaves on here, but also a number of larger trees with their leaves off. I think this is different enough to draw a boundary, and that's the kind of thing you check on the ground. The bunny rabbit here has a little inclusion of what looks like younger forest here, so older, older, and then younger forest here. That's too small to be its own stand, but on the map you might include a note to the logger, say, hey, when you get out here you're going to find this, do something a little different, or just leave it alone. This is a tricky spot here. Looks like the beaver has plugged up this road. We have some flooding here. That flooding has killed the roots of these trees, and therefore the tree itself. So we have a small inclusion of simply dead trees. Here we have older conifer and a sea of younger conifer, and I saw that as just different enough to break out as a stand itself. Or maybe I should say just big enough. Of course, it's very, very different, but it's more than just a small inclusion. I split this into two stands here because I can see this side was accessed from this road, this side was accessed from this road. And it might make sense upon further evaluation on the ground to dissolve this boundary and consider this all one big stand. Versus here, where you can see the skid trails end right about here. So this will have had something done to it, a thinning or a shelter wood, where this I don't see any trails at all. Therefore, this has got to be treated differently from that. This might have good regeneration established, this might not. Because establishing regeneration of a preferred species is the goal of a shelterwood initiation cut. Looking off the nose of the bunny, it looks like we have some kind of a buffer here. You can see the trails ending at that line from all directions. And this, whatever it is different from what's on each side, and also from the bunny itself. So these stands are the units of management. You would conduct inventory for this stand to determine what its saw log volume happened to be, how many cavity trees per acre it happens to have, and you make decisions on the basis of this group of trees. And assuming these are operational boundaries, whatever you do, that data will go forward with this stand as the unit of management. It makes sense to draw the physical boundaries first, so outlining all these roads, and then cutting these into pieces that are, again, homogeneous enough to treat as a unit. And when you get to forest measurements, or forest mensuration, you might talk about combining these two stands in the inventory sense, even though they're physically separate. They're separated by some different forest type, and these might be quite similar to one another, in which case an inventory plot here could potentially be averaged with an inventory plot here, so these inventories would complement one another. So you'll notice skid trails in most of these stands. That's evidence of recent management activity. Or if you zoom in here, these lines that you see all going in that direction, those are shadows from trees, so that's not evidence of recent logging or recent management. So this is a site that you might evaluate for late successional. Late successional isn't old growth. Old growth is defined as having never been cut, but late successional might not have been cut for a very long time, and it might have some of the same functional attributes of old growth, and is therefore something to preserve on the landscape. Now, I don't know who owns this land now. Some of the land in this region has changed hands recently, but this looks like an Irving constructed road. They favor these straight lines over curves following the contour for visibility and other reasons. But Irving is FSC certified, Forest Stewardship Council, and one of the requirements for that is tracking and maintaining a certain amount of late successional forest. So that might be exactly what that is. This is an interesting shape for a stand. You could have blocked that off, but we have recent management here, And all of this looks like it was not touched at the same time as this. So I blocked it off as being different, but I combined all that into one interesting little T-bone shaped stand. So when you're drawing your stand boundaries, pay attention to changes in color. That indicates change in species. And that's one of the most useful things for air photos. Stand boundaries, species composition. Very tricky to do even with LiDAR. There are very smart people working on that question, working on algorithms or training the computer to recognize in the LiDAR point cloud different species. But where we are right now, I think the air photos are still the best, especially when you have fall color air photos. So pay attention to color, pay attention to any kind of long lines that you see. Those are usually going to be skid trails or old roads, and those form a lot of the practical stand boundaries. See how the trails are going this way here and this way here? That was a different operation off a different road. It could have had the same prescription. That's something you'll find out on the ground. So air photo interpretation gives you stand boundaries, and then the inventory itself that you do on the ground fills in the gaps of knowledge that you need to say this is a sugar maple yellow birch stand, average diameter 12 inches, recently shelterwood initiation harvest, so we have good regeneration of yellow birch and sugar maple. LiDAR is going to give you canopy heights and some other metrics, including volume. We will learn how to use and assess those metrics later on in this class, but for now understand they're often very, very good, but still deserve to be checked on the ground.